Okay, so we're going to hit on the programming. Go ahead and hit, I think just tap the next slide. Yeah, okay. So introduction, actually, I've already talked about this. I'm Paul Myers. This is my son, Dave Myers. He was on middle school VEX IQ Team 210S. What'd you win last year?
At state, we won excellence, teamwork, and robot skills.
Okay, so everything. Good job. Real quick, audience poll. How many teams coached a team that had some custom programming? Any custom programming at all? Hands up. Put your hand up. You did it. Custom programming. Okay, so handful, very small percentage. How many of those did a custom driver assist program? So probably less, maybe 1 or 2, 3, even less. How many of them did programming skills? Programming skills. So you created a program and actually ran programming skills at an event. Okay. Now, hands down, everybody who used ModKit, of those people who did ModKit? Okay, hands down. Anybody use Robot C? A few. And anybody use anything else? EasyC, Robot Math Studio, anything? No. Okay, good. Down ahead. So real quick, the VEX website says it supports, I didn't realize it supported Math Studio actually. It says it supports ModKit, Robot C, and inside Robot C there's a couple different versions. There's the graphical and the text version. For, actually, another question. Elementary students, is everybody elementary? Raise your hand, elementary. Actually, raise your hand if you're not elementary. Okay, there are a few. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I wouldn't suggest using text-based programming for an elementary team. Steve? Text-based programming for elementary team?
No.
No. Graphical.
The graphical Robot C,
Yes.
I think is probably good for helping kids understand the structure that comes with the text programming.
And it actually gives you a portal to move from block to text, which is always what I envied about Robot C, that I didn't have a ModKit until almost now. VEX Coding Studio, the new programming language that's going to launch this year for high school robotics, and supposedly will support VEX IQ at some point in the future. We don't know, probably not this year. Has a ModKit language that's very similar to graphical Robot C, but it has a portal to text-based, like Robot C has. So Robot C, unfortunately, and ModKit are both dead languages. They're not developing anymore in those languages because all development is on VCS or VEX Coding Studio. And so the future is VEX Coding Studio, which has a ModKit version, which is graphical Robot C equivalent. And then there's a simple text version, and there's an advanced C++ text version that's really advanced. So they have multiple levels that allow you to kind of move up into it. Looks like it's going to be good. It's not happening this year, maybe next year. And then EasyC and Robot Math Studio were also on the website. Nobody's using that. So you probably recognize some of this, right? It's blocks. Let's see what this has. And then the Robot C has the same kind of blocks. That has a text version of it as well. Let's skip ahead. EasyC looks similar to that. So okay. And Robot Math Studio also looks the same. So let's go, and what we're going to work on today is ModKit. I'm glad to see most of the people use ModKit. There are a few Robot C'ers out there. So hop over to ModKit. Originally I thought I'm going to start for the people who have not done any programming. Hands who haven't done any programming. None at all. Okay. So a little more audience polls. How many of that was because didn't have time? Okay, how many of that was because you're intimidated about what it took to do it? Okay, so more of that. Good. I hope to lessen that intimidation today. My thought was at first we're going to start with a laptop we've never done anything with and we can install it, but then I did a test install this morning, it took 15 minutes, we're not going to waste 15 minutes here. So I've already installed ModKit, but what it takes...
Question, sorry.
Yeah.
Can you do this on Chromebooks? Can any of this programming be done on Chromebooks?
VEX Coding Studio will support Chromebook. None of this can.
Okay.
Can you not run it on Chrome? Because it runs, ModKit runs in a Chrome browser, but you can't, there's no install for Chromebook, is there?
Right. There's no install for
I've never tried it, so
We
no.
tried.
Not this year.
I mean, it's not a powerful program, so you can easily ask your school district, give me an old laptop that's being refurbished.
Windows Vista.
Old Windows or old Mac.
Or if you need me to, I can email them.
Or ask there's people, even ask, there's a lot of, you have to get people who can do it, but to ask companies to donate, say, hey, we really need it.
Our tech department, yeah, we had a company donate laptops to us, but our district decided that it was too difficult to get them up and running and support them, so even though there were only 9 of them.
Does your district have a foundation you can ask for money? That's where I
But we
started.
had the money,
Okay.
but the tech department wouldn't.
Do it yourself.
But
I was gonna say, I don't wanna say this, but we just
They
don't.
won't allow, it won't,
And it has to connect to.
it has to connect to our internet.
And, yeah.
It does work on iPads though?
Is there a guest?
Yes, actually there's iPads. There is an actual app for Max
Okay.
IQ.
But can you also, somebody had this question earlier today, can you download the programming from the iPad to the?
No. There's the current iPad ModKit program stores the program in the iPad and has no way to export it to another machine. So you have to use that same iPad the whole year.
No, but I mean, can you get it from the iPad to the robot?
Oh, yeah, you can.
To
Oh,
go in and.
That's what we struggle with.
Because the Bluetooth.
Getting it to the robot.
Bluetooth, they didn't get
Alright,
it.
thank you.
Moving on. So, probably not. So the challenges are obviously some of them are IT related things, right? Macintosh work great. MacBooks, pretty much flawless. PCs, they get the job done, but not great. It's not supported for Internet Explorer. It's Chrome and Safari only, so you got to run it in Chrome. We're on Chrome. So when you get to modkit.com, this is just the modkit.com on the top here. It gives you, there's actually 2 supported platforms. This is microprocessor thing on the left, and on the right here is the VEX. When you click on VEX, it gives you the option to try it for free now, but down at the bottom is the install the modkit link. That's the important thing. To be able to put the program that you create in this software onto the robot and make the robot move and work, you have to have a way to connect this software into the robot. Currently, that's only done by way of a USB cord, and that is done by way of that installed modkit link. So you have to have modkit link installed and run it. There are a couple videos on here, introduction to modkit, installing modkit for VEX, that are very helpful. That's how I learned how to do it. So I'm sure you can get it. It's not that hard. Don't be afraid of it. Once you get that installed, the modkit actually runs in the browser. Okay, so we clicked on modkit. We're connected to the Wi-Fi here, so we're running through the Wi-Fi. It's in the browser. And now Dave's going to start building a program for this robot. We didn't prep anything at all. I didn't even let him practice. So he's going to show you how relatively easy it is to build a program for a robot right here, live demo. Pressure zone.
Okay. So, main thing, obviously, it's making a driver program.
So the people who haven't seen this might know. There's 2 environments in modkit. One that is kind of a layout of what the robot has on it. That's this. And then on the top, there's a thing called blocks, which is the blocks-based texting, text stuff. It has little wins and forevers and greater than is equal to, all this math and logic kind of stuff. So go back to the robot configuration. So he's configuring a robot.
So
We're going to
then,
use this one right here.
so then you look at a motor you want to add. So then you add that, and then you can go into here and you can name it. You can like figure out the directions. We'll do that later. And then you figure out what port it is in the robot. Currently it's in port 4. So you should drag and drop. You just drag and just hit the port 4.
Go ahead and give it a name, because
Yeah.
confusion comes up if you just leave it called one.
So left arm. So that is the left arm motor. And then on the right, I'm pretty sure was port 11.
So we showed this robot a little bit earlier. This is a modified version of the Flex robot from the default build instructions. It is the same except for it has been extended up. I added some more beams here, just broke it apart and put some more beams in. Added some extra beams here to extend this out. So now it has a further reach travel. Actually it was done until it reached basically almost the maximum size. Obviously, at some point you keep adding beams here, you gotta get to the point where you'll break the expansion limits.
So then tell me what the ports are for the left and right motor.
So this is where that needs some teamwork. The wires, you're clever, we wrote this down.
Like I said,
So the right drive motor is in port, port 12. left drive motor is in port 7.
Okay. So then is that it? Yeah, so, because we have the passive intake. So then that's how, then we just get that.
So let's, to do a quick test here, let's set up what we would call kind of an easy driver control flow. So just make it so that the right and left drive with the joystick.
You just go to, like, hit this little, once you add, see that there's no controller, this little controller signal's gone. As soon as you add the controller to the program, there's this little thing that pops up, and then,
You can't see moving when you click on it. It seems like it's very finicky.
yeah. I mean,
So you're gonna, what are you gonna do, tank drive?
yeah, I was gonna take that.
Okay,
So left is A, usually. So then all I go here, hit this, forward reverse, go into the right one.
So he's assigned that the A joystick is now controlling forward and reverse for the right and left drive, and the D, because the A is, you know, up and down on this side, and D is up and down this side, is controlling that. Now, I'll plug it in and turn it on. So how long have we been broken? 5 minutes? We're about to test.
Can you do that instead of like configuring it?
So you're talking about the default driver control configure. Let's take a step back. So the brains come with its own built-in default driver control. And in that configuration screen, you can choose whether you want to go forward or back on each of the motors. And you choose whether you can go tank drive, I think it's 2 stick, 1 stick, left stick, right stick. There's different configuration options, right? And then there's, I think that's all there is, right? You can't assign multiple motors to one set of buttons. You can't assign, have the motors do anything other than what they're defaulted to, the ports. I think it's ports 1, 6, 7, and 12 are the driver stick ports, and then like 10 and 11 and 4 and 5 are the buttons.
Yeah.
And so with this, very quickly here, you can get more advanced and assign different things. So we're going to see something real quick. So did this come on?
What?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
don't put this on.
Forward?
you're-
Still forward? Is still forward?
2 is good. So you have to select what slot it's going to go to. There's 4 slots in the brain, 4 little spaces to put programs in, and so and he's got to rename
You can
it.
also rename it to like what your team number is, like what day you're working on the program is, just different reminder things.
Right, 'cause you have to be careful because they will erase the programs.
If
Or
you,
they-
yeah, you have
Or
to,
they will name something and go right over the
you have to
top.
remember, to, you can sign in, like currently this is signed into 6210 ends. You go to project, hit save,
Yeah, save.
you can just hit save, and it'll save it onto
Hit
that team.
browse. No, hit browse.
Then you just go browse,
That was the 6010N team, was it called the Nerd? So they have Nerd Auto, Nerdatron, Nerd.
whatever.
That's the name that they named their program
So
last
then-
year.
What I really hate is about the fact that open is right next to delete. Also, I'm pretty sure
Let's
if
take a
you,
look here.
really, if you look at this, if you hit delete, it just deletes and you can't, there's no,
No,
no, are you sure you want to delete this? It literally you just hit it, delete.
You have to be a little careful.
Yeah.
Also, this is, because it's logged into a Google account, it's saving to a cloud drive, which means that if they log onto any other computer and log in with that Google account, you'll be able to access those files on the drive. Unlike the iPad, which is, you don't have cloud access to it. Okay.
Chris, but higher?
What? Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
but you
but they can't
can't,
write programs for the team.
but if you can't email, and they will both answer. And because Dane helped a team this year that ended up going to World, and their team ended up
So
actually
there's,
was in their same division, that team that he helped most of the year with the programming through email at different times, and that team won a programming award of Edison.
Oh.
So while it's a little a bit of a sting for him, look how much
desktop version, it doesn't have to connect to the internet, which they were charging for.
Dang.
There, on our robot research page, we have a YouTube video channel, and there are, Paul was gonna say, he's gonna show you how to download, how to install, link and everything, the VEX link and everything.
Access to internet.
There's videos out there, and there's one on our page that walks you through everything, step by step, and even walks you through kind of what they're going through as well.
You know, it's-
And we're videotaping this as well, so, if you don't, yeah, my kid's page just has information on there. So if you don't get all of this in this hour, that's okay. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there that will.
Most of this is to show you that how easy it is.
Yeah.
Because it isn't that. Now, you just downloaded the program, you gotta pick a slot for it to go in. Let's just test it right here on the table, I'll keep it off. How about that?
So as long as the, while he's doing that, as long as the brain is Bluetooth, you can use it through the iPad. Is that correct?
We have never used the iPad.
Oh, I get it. Push it in.
Okay.
I've never used that.
So
sorry.
in the first test, he found that it said that it was missing a motor. And we looked at the wires again and realized it was plugged into port 10. He had it on port 11, so him and error allowed him to get the wrong port. But it would, okay, don't look at it.
And the other thing while they're doing this that I would say, for the first time you've ever programmed your robot, that default driver mode, you can't overwrite that. So you can let your kids mess around with the 4 slots on there. You can always go back to driver control mode and always have your original driving. You can't, what I'm getting at is you can't really screw this up. But then you tell your kids that, they'll figure out a way. But
Okay, so he's gonna test it. So push forward on the right drive, right button forward. Okay, so right, that's good. Push forward on the left. Now it goes backwards. So he's got a reverse motor issue. So your left drive needs to go in the configure thing, and right at the bottom there's a little checkbox that just turns the drive around. So we very quickly decide, oh, like, if you were smart, you could look at the motors. There's a little symbol on it, and you could look at the little symbol there and match them up and figure out what it is. Or you can just very quickly try it and figure out what's wrong and then fix it and do it again. You'll notice we're keeping the robot plugged in because this is enough cable to drive around a little bit. And that allows him to download and even hit play. There's a button here, this little triangle button in the upper right-hand corner. He can click on that to start the program. So he can hit download and hit play, and it starts, and now he tests it and see if it works. So drive them both back, go forward. Yeah. So now it's turning correctly?
Yep.
Okay, so everything's good about the drive system. We've, in 10 minutes with some talking, 50 minutes, created a custom drive for it. Now we're going to do the arms. This would be a robot you couldn't do with default driver control because we have 2 motors that need to work together. This robot was the original default robot, which had 1 motor on one side, and when they added the extra length and this weight out here, this motor couldn't get the job done anymore. So there's 2 options. We could change the gear ratio. This is a 1:5. You can make it a 1:10 or something else, and it would go slower. Or we realized it was pretty close. We just threw another motor on here. You have 6 motors to work with, and there's only 4 now. It was 3. So by putting the second motor on there, but you can't do anything in the default control to control 2 motors with 1 set of buttons. And so,
in the driver control, you can just use the 2 buttons. You can
right,
2
4
buttons.
man's version would be you'd have these buttons do it, and you would, to go up, you'd have to push both up buttons, and to go down, you have to push both down buttons.
Which eventually you'll just get one of them ahead of the other, and then it'll just start glitching
Well,
out.
and it would, when you stopped, it would be fighting itself against itself, and it would probably overheat those motors and make them less efficient.
Yeah.
So, he's going to create, with these little button inputs, the ability to go up and down with, you're using the R button.
Yeah.
Yep, okay, so both motors.
I got the other one.
And download.
Also, should we do the buttons that can control the radio?
Yeah, we'll do that second. Okay, hit play.
It is on. Well, it is on.
Wait it.
I don't know.
Okay, so what's it doing? It's sagging because it's not, the holding isn't on. It doesn't follow the holding on. So, there's a setting inside of the control of those motors that tells whether the motor should try to keep the motor from moving when it's not being moved by way of some control, and it's called holding. So the holding setting makes it such that it stays holding on. So he went over to the blocks part, right arm too.
I got him.
Okay. And added a when start, set holding to on. So that's just a little thing that, when start, so when, yes.
Also, these need to be. What?
So you-
Brake and coast. You want to talk about those?
You explain.
So the motor by default was set to coast, which means when you raise the arm up, it doesn't try to do anything. It just lets the arm fall back down kind of as fast as it can. Another option is the hold, which means when it raises the arm up, it actively works to hold the motor right where it is. So it's actually going to sort of drive the motor backwards to keep it in place. to keep it raised up there.
Right,
Which would be different, you know, if it's holding something up there, it may have to work a little bit more to hold it up there. Right?
internal in the motor is an encoder, a little counter that shows where it's at. And so it can know, once you stop moving, I'm supposed to be here at, you know, so many revolutions, and if it starts to sag, it'll fight against that, and it'll hold the motor.
There's actually a third setting on there, which is brake, which makes it so that the motor tries not to turn. So once it moves up there, then it kind of puts the brakes on. It's not going to do it extremely efficiently, so you'll see it come down a bit slower than what it does in coast, when it's just not trying to do anything. In coast, you can pretty much drop the arm.
Yeah, that's a robot C thing. It's not, there's nothing like that like it.
No, actually, there is a thing. I always thought it was just to break the, there's a break.
No, that's break out of the loop.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was.
Not B-R-A-K-E, B-R-E-A-K. Okay, so he's now added a couple of lines of code that says when start. So that means when the program starts, it's going to do whatever's below that block. That's the way this block-based code works. So it says when start, set holding to on. So both those motors are now going to set holding on. Each of the motors have a tab along the top that is associated with the motor, and that programming that's underneath that tab runs and has access to a lot of the stuff in the motor. So now you see that when it stops, leave it there, so it doesn't. Even if I push on it, it's going to fight. The motors, in fact, I'll push it.
Don't break it.
I'll have to put, I mean, it'll either give, because motors have a limited amount of power, or it breaks it, which is.
Or break it.
Okay. So,
While he's
But you
fixing it, I
see-
just wanted to point out, Dan, would you click on block, robot again? So they identified that the arm was falling down and they wanted to break or stop it from going down. So they actually went to code the left arm and right arm motor, and he toggled over to blocks. And when you went to blocks, this is actually the coding screen and where we can actually start telling and giving it commands. He used two commands, and it was the first one was the control when I hit the start button, which is the yellow, and they kind of keep them sorted by groups. The when I hit start, that's basically you hitting the program on. So when I hit the start button, it's going to start doing, and then the next command is setting it to hold. So we're actually putting that motor, when you hit start, we're going to put that motor in hold mode.
There are different types of ones. There's like one start, there's one controller when you press a button. You can also add new things that go along with broadcast.
we'll get into that a little bit more. Let's not get too deep. Okay, first of all, drive the robot. We're just to show you how easy this is, he's got a functional driver control system right now. He's able to drive the robot. As he picks up the blocks, just pushing the single button to move it up, he's able to move the robot around. Or hubs, right? So there's no reason to be intimidated by getting started with ModKit. It's super lucky score. Okay. So that's a very simple driver assist program. What we're going to do next is we're going to do a very simple autonomous program. Okay? Ready for that? Okay. So, the little settings that we have there in the, are on that first screen, the robot configuration screen, are limited. Right there, in essence, they're tell which buttons want to have direct control over which motors. They can't do anything about moving them to a certain distance and stopping, or any kind of advanced smart movement. It's just a matter of what motors respond to what buttons and what sticks, right? So to do anything more advanced, you have to get in here and do some extra code. Don't want to do that. Don't want to do that. Okay. Because we're oh, I see what you're saying. No, that's fine. Make a different program. Dump that out. Save it as different. Override. I wanted him to create a new program. Rename robot. Rename robot. No. I wanted you to rename that existing program.
Oh, okay.
Because why recreate all that work, right?
Good point.
All the work of assigning what was what and what was for, you want to recreate that. Robot auto.
I'm not the best at names.
Get rid of the controller. Now, for the autonomous, you don't have to have a controller program in it. if you run an autonomous program that doesn't have a controller in it, it'll actually run without the controller even being in the room. It doesn't even need to have connection to the thing. If the controller's in there, just like the default one, if the controller's not turned on or it's not in the room, it won't go until the controller comes close enough and is turned on and the connection is
I
paired.
found out the rules. the
But
fact
you don't
that-
have to have that. Don't worry about that, that's way too advanced. That's great. There's a little tiny print in the rules that says that during robot skills, autonomous robot skills, you're supposed to bring your controller to the field to show that the robot's run on its own and somebody's, like, isn't in the crowd controlling it. It'd be, I mean, that's a lot of work to cheat that hard. It'd be easier just to program a good robot. Okay. So, let's go to the blocks. So we're going to create an autonomous routine. First of all, let's talk about strategy for autonomous, right? So in autonomous, I think you've already talked about this some, right? You start in the starting spots, right? Which is here or here. Dane, where do you want to start?
The left side.
Why?
Because it's easier to the other ones.
It's closer to all the glory. All the good stuff is over here, right? There's nothing to do over here but pick those. Okay. Now what strategy are you going to take for a very simple, quick, 10-minute autonomous routine?
I think a really good thing would probably be to get some, like, turn, get around, do it to sort of, like, do it to turn, go over here, turn, and then just do the push these two.
Yeah, and this is what we do a lot of times when we're doing autonomous programming, is storyboard it out. Figure out where you need to go, right? So what's that going to require? What kind of steps does it take?
So first, turning,
Yep, so left-hand turn of some sort, right?
right, moving the right motor.
Yep.
Move forward, a little bit, turn, then forward.
Okay, perfect. Go get a program.
Alright.
So you can start this in any configuration, right, Dane? This is kind of in the way down here,
Yep.
so we'll be able to start it with this top, right? Because it's under 15 and it's under the.
So,
So don't worry about the arm.
there's a when.
Other than holding it.
There's no bumper on that, right?
No, there's a bumper. So
Is it?
yeah, it's upside down. It is in port 8.
Okay.
Question. Does the squares help you measure how far you go or how far you tell them to move forward?
You mean the lines on the field?
The lines on the field.
You can. So when we set it up, we'll see. When you do a certain move, you've got the ability to go a certain distance based on some math, right?
Right.
And so the wheels are actually defined by their travel around one revolution. Those are 200 millimeter wheels, which is in English terms 8 inches-ish, right? So one revolution of the motor should get you 8 inches of travel, barring any slippage. So yes, you can use and use the lines and the distance in inches to do some math and figure out how many revolutions you can get. You can also just do trial and error. That's a lot of times what the kids end up doing.
But just as a plug, that's the kind of thing you can do your STEM research project on, the math of programming and the wheels. and the-
Because this year's STEM is about math, yes.
Then, what I would normally do in this case is have a student write down with a piece of paper. What do we say first? Turn left.
When
So we'll have to write that
bumper
down.
pressed.
Then we're gonna go back and figure out exactly how far it has to turn. But then the second step would be drive forward.
I can print off a picture of the field, so that they can have the visual representation of what they need to do, and that's how I learn. And so they come to me like, well, I'm gonna do this and this and this, and they're just doing this. That means nothing to me, so I take the diagram out for me, so I can understand what they're saying.
And again, this is all very good material for the design notebook.
Yeah.
They write it all down, say these are the steps, and then they'll show in their notebook how they converted that to the program steps. So there he's got the first turn. Then he's gonna have a drive forward. And again, we'll just have one student document all that, write down what the steps are. Then he takes that back to the guy on the computer who's gonna start converting that into actual steps.
Yes. Yes.
So, really quickly, he's just gonna have it such that so we have two different tabs to work at, left drive, right drive, right? You're not actuating the arm at all during this process. So you're just creating a sequence of commands that happen from after the bumper's pressed. So it's when bumper is pressed, and that's another one of those fine print rules that you can't start your autonomous by pushing your controller. You have to start it by pushing a button on your robot.
Touch lady. So then also, so then on this side, we have to wait a second because the left drive isn't actually going to be moving. I noticed that it's better to just turn without the left drive.
Sure.
So then the left drive just has to wait. You put a wait here, and then you put like maybe spin
So
forward.
he's saying spin forward by the number of revolution. Now, we know forward's going to be forward because we did the check on it to make sure that forward was forward back when we checked the box. If forward ends up being in reverse, you can go back to that box on the configuration screen and just toggle the.
So then on this side, it seems kind of so you don't have to just do this. You don't have to have two of these going like this. It seems that we can all just go over here and put 3 in here instead of 2 of them. This is 1 and 2.
So you've got your right motor going without your left motor to make the turn, and then your right motor is going to continue while the left motor kicks in, and you've got to go straight for a while. And then what happens?
We have to turn left a bit,
So
which would mean that we have to spin reverse on this motor.
or you can stop it. Yeah, reverse.
Spin reverse. No,
That's
that's
two.
There we go. And then also, we can just have in the left drive, instead of doing that, we can again just add 5.5 revolutions. So then, for the rest of it, and then move right, spin forward again. Which is maybe another 3.
It's going to be a trial and error thing, so.
Yes. It's always, you never know what's going to happen, you always just have to guess and check, and then I'm just going to keep spinning.
You have a question?
Is the only reason you're not doing programming with the default drivetrain one because you get more control over it if you're doing controlling each motor individually?
Yeah,
Because that one you can do inches, right?
yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get into that.
Okay.
You're ahead of the crowd here. So download.
Yeah.
You can only select it if you add a bumper. You
You
add a
see
bumper,
how, like, if I'm looking at,
You have to drag them on.
see how, if I just start here,
you're gonna go to the robot tab and you
Then
add
it's
a
all
bumper.
over the
Okay.
robot.
so,
Add that in.
go over here, if you added the bumper, like, if you added having the bumper here, then when you go to the when start, this bumper's here. But how, if I add a controller, and then I go over to the thing, when, the other one, now it has controller, which other thing, it only has the, it only has the whens if it is in your robot.
And the reason why they added the bumper, you can use the check mark, which is start. When you hit start, it runs. Teams like to add a bumper in a really clear, open spot so kids can just tap it really quick instead of digging in and hitting the check mark. You'll see some teams will use the light LED because it looks cool and you can light up different colors. And some will say it's red when it's ready to go. You hit it and it's green when it's running its course. You can do those types of things, but yeah, you won't see it until you drag it into that program. That's why there's 2 features and it takes some getting used to. Anyway, yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that you could have 3 separate programs, so you could theoretically put 3 different bumpers up there and one would be, would that work?
Also, we can also, with 3 separate programs, you don't actually have to have 3 separate buttons. You can have one button that in one program does this, and the other program does a different thing.
Yeah, but would you have to use the arrows to go down?
Well,
to try to?
along the same lines, you can have one program that looks at 3 different buttons.
Yeah.
And if you
okay,
press
so
button
could-
1, it does this sequence. Press button 2, it does that sequence.
So it's an option. You can use
Yes,
Steve's, or what Dane was saying, you could do the arrows to arrow down. You could use a, you.
There's actually, what did you guys do last year? You had
We had,
no, it was 2 years ago.
2 years ago, we had 3 programs. One was just a driver program like this.
Well, it's not 3 programs, it was 3 routines within this main.
Oh yeah, 3 routines.
And then what happened?
What?
The first time they hit the bumper switch, it
Oh,
started
yeah.
the first routine and it set a variable to a different level. And so then the next time it pushed the bumper switch, it looked at that variable and said, oh, I know I'm on step 2, and it did a different routine. And then set the variable to a 3rd level, and then the 3rd time you hit the button, it would do a 3rd routine. So you can go through a sequence of
But that was
routines.
very risky, because more than once, the person was.
If you double tap the button, you jump the routine.
So
Yeah.
Okay, so
within the
that happened
program,
in
are you putting 3 different limbs in there, like blend and then second
Yes.
time? Okay, all right.
run the program. So this is his first event. Oh, home return.
That's all.
Okay, come back and do some quick modifications. How much time we got? We're supposed to do 2:30, right?
Yes.
We still have
So that did not work.
time. What happened there?
So it overshot on the first rotation.
So then, what are you changing? You need to say what you're changing.
I'm gonna change how many rotations it did. Also, I'm trying to think.
So
It
the,
kept turning. Like the left drive kept turning. As if
don't think past that first step.
What?
Don't think past the first step.
No, I'm just saying. I'm looking past.
It overturned the first rotation. There's an adjustment.
And I will point out what Paul just said. When you're doing autonomous mode and you're fine tuning it, it's easy for the kids to want to make several changes. Start at the very first one, make a change, test it, then the next step. It's like a Rube Goldberg machine. The first turn they need to perfect right now is that left turn. Don't do left turn, then the forward. You need to do the left turn, test it, now move on to step 2.
Yeah, he probably overdid it by trying to do all 3 steps at once.
And yeah,
Okay, go. We're trying to go quicker. Yeah. The great strategy is right, step by step. In fact, sometimes you'll actually want to do little segments of code at the end of the segment of code, broadcast another, so there's a, oh, there. Okay, now what happened?
It didn't turn far enough.
So another adjustment. All right.
Paul, I have a question.
Yes.
Is this your primary platform of choice for the kids, or?
My kid?
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
We do have some coaches within our program who prefer the Robot C and
Do you?
use
Okay.
that exclusively.
And I didn't argue with them because they had experience with C and because I thought it was a nice migration. But I'm telling you, if you start right now and you're going to choose a program, ModKit is the entryway to VEX Coding Studio. And VEX Coding Studio is the only software that will be supported for VEX through the entire program. So if you have to choose today, yes, absolutely choose ModKit. Because the ModKit first level of VEX Coding Studio is the start of the most advanced stuff they're going to have. Yes?
So in Robot C, you have a green tab that you can put in, and it does absolutely nothing. And you can put in this section, the robot is going to do this. Does ModKit have the same
do
thing?
you trust that stop?
Yeah, that would be like a wait. In this program, there's a thing called wait.
Yeah.
That's the second thing. I don't know if you can read it. So the first thing says start, second thing says wait. And so that just basically says, just take it, it's about 0.7 seconds. So
Like, you can post this comment.
Oh, so for
this
comment.
robot's going to go forward.
Yeah, you're talking about commenting the code so you know what to show them some comments, throw a comment.
Oh, yeah.
Because that helped my student organize his thoughts, because he wanted to do the exact same thing, program it all, and
Right. There's a little thing called notes, which gives you the ability to edit and add some comments. Dane's gonna put some words in here. We need to make it bigger. Right.
So you're saying that's not part of the coding, it's just so you remember what it did?
Yeah. It's very helpful in.
That is just words
It's
that
like
you
a
put anything in
Post-it
there. It
note.
says,
Yeah.
It's like
Post-it.
you stuck a Post-it note on
Yeah.
there.
Exactly.
It doesn't actually do anything other than it helps you remind you what exactly that code does.
So,
Sometimes it can get very confusing when there's so much code in screen.
okay, so did that work?
But it worked a lot better than the last 2 attempts.
And so, I'll learn it again.
Okay,
One point.
Yeah, 1 point. 1 point of thumbs. That will, early in the season, be competitive.
Not that I didn't trust you, but I just wanted to help you out a little bit.
thank you.
That was very impressive, though. It stopped on the edge.
He did the math, but I'm not sure it was right.
I'm not sure it was right either.
So now let's go to a more advanced version. Dane actually uses a strategy where he uses states, which is even more advanced, so he may not have ever seen this. But go into the robot, and scroll all the way down.
Oh yeah.
Choose driver.
I remember.
You played with this before, right?
I have, I hate it.
Okay, let me. Okay. So go ahead and do the configuration of that, and let's set this up and see if we can do this.
So I'm gonna save this as it is, and then just make it.
So good strategy, save what worked, and now maybe give it a different name. Okay. So he's not gonna lose that stuff that was actually somewhat working. Now in drivetrain, this allows you to, so you're gonna, okay, you have to throw away the motors that were in there already.
Yeah, because ports don't.
Because it asks you to put those motors in the ports.
There we go.
So this is a more advanced version of the little configuration, robot configuration. And click on that little gear in the bottom right hand corner. And so that it gives you the option on what your wheel sizing is. I'll do some quick measurements for you here.
I know they're on the
Is it
wheels,
all on these? Oh,
but they can't be
Let's do
both.
both.
They can't be both on the wheels.
sorry about that.
Why I don't like this already?
Okay, so your wheelbase on the left-hand side there
Yeah.
is, I'll call it roughly 7 inches in millimeters. That's 175
Why would they do this?
in millimeters.
No, why would they choose to do this drivetrain thing?
Because it's for a very starting level program. It allows you to control both right and left with one set of code. You know, Stan was building 2 sets of code, right wheel code and left wheel code, and he had to synchronize them. That's a little complicated. This allows you to have a single set of code that goes, it's forwards, and turns, and stuff like that. And because you put the wheelbase in and the length like that, it can pretty accurately, not perfectly, make turns.
And if you build the standard one, you don't have to go in and change this, right? 'Cause
Right,
it's
these
already
numbers-
set to it.
Right, would be set up for the standard wheelbase. And then the track thing,
It's a 2 motors rear front. It's rear, but it's not exactly.
well, it's 4-wheel drive, so it's evolved that way too.
Gear ratio? Any at all?
Yeah, it's, well, what are those?
It's a 3-2.
So,
How do you know that?
It's a,
quickly recognizing. I mean, so,
this is my 4th year doing this,
No,
and
but explain it then.
so this is, I know by the shape of the sprocket that, I've just used these sprockets so much that I've seen that the orientation of how many holes are in the sprocket or how big the sprocket is, that I just see that it's the 24 sprocket,
yeah, actually,
24 tooth sprocket,
and then
and
this
then
is
the
16.
16, yeah. 16 tooth, which is,
It's how
each
many-
of
It's
the,
basically the same type of gearing we were talking about just a minute ago.
it's in its 8,
He knows what the gears is.
Never
That's what
bothered
it is.
counting those things.
8 is 1, 16 is the 2.
So we always refer to sprockets and gears as terms of 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5.
Because that's a.
The 1 is the smallest, and the 5 is the biggest of sprockets and of gears. And then there's a 4 and a 3 and a 2. And then when you do a ratio like this, is it drives on a number 3 sprocket and the wheels are on a number 2 sprocket, you get a 3-to-2 drive ratio, which is what.
Okay.
The track width thing is 200 millimeters.
Good. There. So, and is that it?
It says calibrate. Have you ever done this?
separate, yeah, they're separate.
No, wheels should be connected, that's what you
Yeah,
want.
they're connected, yeah.
There.
Um,
And hit the right hand button,
what
or the bottom right corner of the calibrate. What's that do?
the center of the center of rotation.
Okay,
We've never done this before, so.
no, this is where we get the on wheels. When you have all four on wheels, it should center rotation about where it is right there, so you can leave it there.
Okay.
So when you have two friction wheels and two omni wheels, the omni slide easily side to side, the friction wheels don't, so you tend to rotate about the center axis right between the two friction wheels, and vice versa.
That puts the center of rotation right on this axle,
Right.
because these are gonna roll
Those
sideways.
slide sideways super easy, and the friction wheels don't.
Back to the friction of these wheels sliding when you're trying to make the turn. So with the drum wheels in front, we'll have the center right here. 4 omni wheels, are gonna put the center pretty much in the center.
Right. So let's leave it as it was with calibrated. Check the calibrate again, because you just. Oh,
Yeah, that's good.
so you can see already we're running into some limitations based on what they programmed it. They didn't plan for a 4 omni-wheel robot. This robot, because the omni-wheels don't really have trouble going over the terrain, and because, I think Steve mentioned this too, when you get hung up on an edge with a friction wheel, sometimes you can't get past it, but this will slide past. A lot of our teams end up using all omni-wheels. The year that they had the bridge, they had to drive over, it was a pretty significant challenge to get on the bridge. And a lot of our teams ended up with 2 omnis and 2 friction wheels because the bridge was a challenge to get onto. So if there's no terrain obstacles that are tough to go over with omni wheels, then omni wheels are oftentimes a good solution. Unless there's driver concerns or alignment kind of concerns. Okay, drivetrain.
Alright, I've never done this before. Yeah.
Well, do it when the button's pushed. So let's try to make the same routine happen, but with this drivetrain.
It's about I'd say,
Well, 90 degrees would be a right angle there, right? So,
so.
you sure you're turning right?
Yeah, I'm turning, yeah, I'm not exactly sure what direction I am turning. So, it's about a 40. I don't want to go exactly 45.
No, 90. That would be nice.
Oh, yeah, I am very young. Yay. Alrighty.
You like radius? Okay, and now
so-
what's the next step?
So then you turn left, and then go straight, drive forward.
Sure, no, you want to.
Oh yeah, the weight.
No, what distance?
Yeah, then you just drive forward.
For a distance.
Oh yeah,
For a
I
distance,
thought we were doing
not
distance.
forever.
I thought we were doing distance.
So, there's 2 options here with these drives. You can drive forward for a certain amount of just length, right? So it's got, drive forward for 25 millimeters, that's not very far.
I know, I could change that.
But if you were to put drive forward and not have certain distance, what it does is it engages the forward drives and then moves on in the program. So you could say drive forward, and then at the next thing say wait for 2 seconds. And then after that, wait for 2 seconds, put a stop. And so it would drive forward for a count of 2 seconds, not for a distance. And there's examples, what's a good example of why you would want to drive for a time, not a distance?
So,
Why would you want to drive for a certain amount of time instead of driving for a certain amount of distance?
because in distance,
In distance, it's going to go until it gets there. It's going to keep working to get there until it gets there. Is there a possibility that it might not make it there?
if it gets hung up on something?
Right, if it gets stuck, then, or it runs into the sidewall, it's going to get to the point where it's like, I'm trying to go another half an inch. You told me to go 2 inches, and I've gone 1.5 inches. I want to go to a half inch, and it can't go anymore because it's stuck, and it won't ever go on to the next step of the program because it hasn't been able to complete the previous step. And so driving forward for a certain amount of distance or a certain amount of time means that I'm going to turn the wheels on and drive forward the speed that I've been asked to drive, and then after that time is up, regardless of how far I've gone, I will move on to the next step. So if there's risk of hitting something and getting hung up on something and not getting the move complete, then you might want to make the move based on time, not based on distance of travel. Go ahead and give us, so what was on the math here, you decided you wanted to go forward couple of sections here, that's about 24 inches.
Yes, I was saying, like 24, 25 inches.
Sure. Now you're gonna turn back towards the corner, right?
Right.
Paul, can you blow that up?
Oh, yep. Okay.
And then,
Yeah, the numbers up there. No?
so then I can turn right for seems to be exactly the same 80 degrees. Actually, I want to do it slightly less because I want to be able to turn towards the scoring zone.
Yeah, okay.
That should work, right? And then
That seems reasonable.
so
Yes.
I'm pulling it forward. Get it forward for another.
Well, this is a good example. You're gonna drive till you hit the corner. You might not wanna go for a distance, you might wanna go for a time.
You may throw with weight.
So are the colors, Paul, maybe while he's doing that, explain what the different colors blocks, how the blocks are divided up into different colors.
Right, the blue blocks that we're doing here are motor control, or even motor system control blocks. They control that. If you're in a tab that is, some other sensor, maybe it's just a sensor or a gyro or something like that, they're also control, or it's called output, actually. There's a set of purple blocks up there, scroll on up, just to give it, which are sensing, so this gives you the ability to get inputs, like you can find out if the bumper is down or not. You can find out what the controllers controlling is doing, the battery, there's lots of different things you can find out from the brain. Let's go ahead and download this program. Yeah, this stuff.
Okay.
Yes.
Dane, why did you put the weight in?
What?
That weight?
Because I have it in so it's not an actual time, so that's actually moving for time, not distance. So instead of you just put drive forward, you have to put the weight so that when it drives forward, it waits 0.5 seconds, and then the stop, and then it actually stops. So it'll drive for 1.5 seconds.
That drive is going to drive to the corner over here, and there's a risk that it won't get done because it's going to run into the wall before it gets there. And so by doing it for a certain amount of time versus doing it for a certain amount of distance means it will get done. Now, what happens after it does get done? Nothing. But it's likely that you may want to add more program code, back up, turn, and do some more stuff. That if you asked it to go for 20 inches and it can only go 15, then it stops. It's not going to move on. It won't complete because this turn till it's 80 degrees does nothing until it completes that turn. And then it goes to the next step, drive until it goes 24 inches. It won't do anything. It's getting stuck in that block, not moving on, not advancing through the program until the 24 inches is achieved. And the turn for 75 degrees, same thing. Gonna turn, stay there until it gets it done. This drive forward says, okay, turn the motors on, start driving, and move on. Ooh, that went hard there, huh? Try it again. So, test the debug time.
Need a reverse direction.
Something's horribly wrong about the configuration of your drivetrain.
Yeah.
Your left and right motors are flipped because it's turning right instead of left.
So
It's off the screen. You got to right.
The right,
And I'm most certain that the FlexBot and StretchBot drive bases are set up for default of this. You wouldn't have to go in. The only thing I think you might have to change is flipping the forward reverse, which they're going to do right now. You wouldn't have to go in and change it, measure the dimensions and the width and everything. I think it should be pretty standard. But you might have to, I think you might have to reverse these. Will you show that how you just did that again, real quick?
it's easier on these motors, so you should. Like,
Show on the drive.
you go in
Both
here,
ways.
you get this check mark to reverse direction.
You see even the icons right there, the little plus and minus directions on the motor, flip-flop when you check the reverse versus uncheck the reverse.
And if you
Go back in the other one.
yeah.
And then this one.
You just clicked right on the motors there.
Right there, reverse. So you found that those are both.
Those
So
move-
based on the way they're geared, they're obviously not geared to turn in the right direction.
So then, and then also in the drivetrain, it's turned way too far.
Well, 80 degrees is the right amount of degrees, so I feel like,
So the drivetrain's
I feel like the drivetrain is assigned. It could be because it's not, it's all omni wheels. It could also be on a map. Did I get the millimeters to inches conversion right? Probably not. Okay, go ahead and,
So no, it's,
you're right, let's just change this to be a smaller number. It seemed like it's going 1.5
the
times.
thing is, it actually ended up, because it turned the wrong way.
So it
but
started
ended up-
here and went past 180 and all the way around to where you wanted to be.
Yes.
So you really went 180 plus 90, which is 270-ish.
It was at 80, so was that, plus.
Was about 3
plus
times what you
100,
wanted.
So 280, which is
About 4 times what you wanted.
a little less
So
than
20.
times.
Oh, well, just if anybody has any questions, wait.
20. Okay.
A little
Any
less than-
questions? I mean, that's tough, I'm
A
sure. Go
little
ahead.
less than 4 times.
Okay, so I've not used Market, I've used Robot C, both graphical and text.
Okay.
Does this have as much capability in it as the Robot C text?
No, the Robot C text is very powerful. It has lots of ability to do lots of stuff. However, there are several things that this does behind the scenes that you can get in trouble with Robot C. Robot C, you can get into a subroutine that locks up and it won't continue to execute. And this runs multiple processes, multiple routines at the same time because it's running kind of a multi-process background program to be able to deal with all these different motor tabs, stuff like that. So I always tell people that a little bit off on the turn, right? Okay, Jeff?
What about the documentation for it?
So like support documentation, help kind of
If I
stuff
wanted
with this?
to, well, I wanted to
Very
see
little.
drive forward 24 inches versus drive forward, and how one takes control and one doesn't.
Right.
Is that, can
Um,
you find that somewhere?
No, not really. There's pretty poor documentation for Marquette. I don't know, is it any better for Robot C?
Robot C does have a lot of documentation.
The graphical one, yes, no?
I'm not sure exactly.
Are you talking about individual commands and what they mean? Is that what you're asking?
For one thing.
Yeah. I don't know if it's on our website, but I've seen there is a resource for someone that did outline what each command is and what they do. And I
Well,
think
Robot C, when I do it with Project Visual, when you hover over the button, it tells you what it is.
There's actually a little, right here, where if you hover, there's a little question mark, you can hardly see it. But if you hover over it, can you click on it? Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so here's the level of documentation that Marquette provides. There's a little help button beside each command. It tells you what you can drive and what the parameters are. And it's probably turn, yep, same kind of thing. So there is a little bit of documentation behind it.
So I have a question. My kids were using Robot C, the graphical version, and they got the programming. Like they know how to do that. I mean, they don't perfect. They know how to do it. But we really struggle connecting it to our bot's brain. And I know, like, one of the things to troubleshoot is that they're both updated the same.
You have to make sure.
We were struggling like kids.
Firmware?
Yeah. I was trying to help them brainstorm.
You mean to get the program from the computer onto the board?
Onto the bot. That's what we struggled with.
One thing you do have to make sure of, there's software that you can use to update the firmware, which
They
is,
have to be the same, right?
it's a good idea to have the latest firmware. You have to make sure that software is closed before you can use either Modkit or Robot C to talk to the robot. Because
updating software?
the software that updates the firmware will sort of lock that port, so Robot C can't access the port at the same time.
Are there other possible things to troubleshoot for that?
So, as far as Modkit goes, and he explained it really in the beginning, I don't know how the Robot C connects, but there's a separate program going on in the background that you can kind of see in your tray down at the bottom. That's the Robot Modkit Link, which actually allows it to communicate to the robot. So if you plug it in without that Modkit Link activated or installed, it'll try to install a driver, but there's actually can you click on the bottom right corner? It shows it.
Yeah, it's in the tray down here.
It's this little guy right here that is it'll auto connect in the background. Sometimes you don't even realize it, but I think a lot of people miss that step. It is actually installed. What does Robot C use? Do they have a separate little?
There is something
It's all built in.
in Robot C, my students, I'll be honest with you, they know way more about it than I do. I have no idea what they were doing. But they went into YouTube and figured out that they had to actually have something going on. They had to switch some command that allowed them to connect to the brain.
Okay.
But again, I know nothing about it.
I know in regular, I don't know about graphical, but in regular robots, there is a thing under like the robot that you can click that says USB or
Like how it's gonna connect.
how it's going to connect.
But that was it for.
Yeah, I say, I don't do the graphical, so there's that one, because I also know in, it's under robot.
And that's kind of what they do in the room. We may not have time to continue.
Yeah, I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's not what I do.
I got your fourth grade standards.
Are there other questions that we can, we're going to take a break here pretty soon. Is there other questions that we can help answer about, specifically about programming? I mean, as you can see, once you get your initial program going, a lot of this is trial and error. And your kids need to know and understand this enough, because what you do on one field at school is going to be different than when you take it to the competition. And they are like, well, it's not fair. This field is not the exact same. And you have to account for that. Things might be a little bit different. There might be a little bit different wear or tear or rip, or the fields may be uneven, or like this table is hanging off the edge. And every competition is going to be a bit set up, and they need to be prepared to make those tweaks and adjustments on the program and on the software.
Right, having a computer that you take to the competitions is pretty essential.
Yeah.
That they can change and but as you can see, there's so much little tweaking and things like that. We often have programming only practices sometimes, because otherwise you have kids, but it's good to have at least, don't let it just be one person. It should at least be 2 or 3 working on it, but all of them should have a general knowledge of the thing. But it might be good to sometimes only have a few of them there, because it does take a lot of try it again, learn it again. Right.
Yep.
You had mentioned like starting the multiple programs like from the starting line. On Module, that's just like going to drive and making different sections.
So you mean slot 1, 2, 3, 4? Is that what you're talking about? The different slots?
No, I mean like so that I could hit a bumper and then do one thing, hit a bumper, do another thing, hit a bumper, do another thing.
Okay.
Would that all go like if I went to drivetrain and make separate columns?
You can have a setting for each button.
Okay.
So those commands go under the button, not under the.
Well, remember, he was launching his by win button pressed. If you had 3 buttons, you could have win button 1 pressed and do a routine. Win button 2 pressed and does something different. Win button 3 pressed and does something different. And remember, in autonomous, you're allowed to grab the robot and pull back. Most of the time, they don't set up the game where it's advantageous to move your robot back to the beginning spot. Right here, when I move back here, it's a perfect spot to go hang, right? So I can see basically everybody is going to want to move the robot back and hit that the last few seconds to hit the button to go hang on the bar, because that's a.
You can see Dane just now added a second bumper on a robot, and when he did, it now allows you to do bumper 1, bumper 2. So you can, he's in drivetrain. In this, you can do a whole separate win bumper 2, right, the whole code. The only way this is going to work is when bumper 1 is pushed. This will work when bumper 2 is pushed. And you can run that. And they'd all, and you just.
In essence, it's subroutines that are launched by a different bumper. They're all waiting to be run, but they're only being run when you press the appropriate button that they're associated with. So it gives you the option to, instead of selecting different programs, they're in essence different little sections of program, all within the same main program, and activated at different buttons.
For the elementary kids that play with Scratch, it's the same concept. And adding inputs and scratch is the same. You just keep building different inputs, all on the same screen. It's just really, that's what I prefer mod kit. I think it's so much less intimidating just because it's more graphical, inviting, and friendly than Robot C is. I mean, it looks like code. The middle school kids start saying, well, I want real coding. This isn't real coding. Because they want to start typing. Well, it is. This is just not the syntax of actually typing in lines of code.
And in VEX Coding Studio, Steve's a beta tester, but I also downloaded beta for the PCS. And when you're programming something like this, there's a button that takes this and translates exactly into code. And it's letters and semicolons and curly brackets and all the stuff that you see with normal C code, but it's behind the graphical. And so the future is this VEX Coding Studio that will transport you from the mod kit, simple, to the more complex, which is the robots, the C, to even the highest level C++.
Steve just threw something. You can switch over. This will be the last thing. We'll do a lunch or break. We'll take a 10-15 minute break before we do the last two sessions.
So one thing that I would recommend, even if you're going to do custom programs, is there's a certain set of ports that work in the default program. So for example, port number 1 will always drive the left motor. That comes from the left joystick, or something else if you're using a single joystick. And port 7, those both control the motors on the left. The same way 6 and 12 control the motors on the right. There's also, if you have an ARM, you may want to connect it to port 10. Then that will be controlled by the left up and the left down button. This sheet is in the documents that George has shared.
Thank you.
Under building.
Under building.
Building, that's what I was talking about, building robots.
That's your team.
Not your team.
There we go.
There you go.
I'm gonna also put it in programming just for those thinking more.
So that shows the default ports. One reason you want to do that, even if you're going to create your custom programs, because if you get to an event and somebody's done something to the program and suddenly the program's not working like it should, which happens, then you can go back to using the default program, the default driver control software, and make it so that it's going to do some basic functionality. Like I say, those are the standard ports. Really convenient if you can use those. You may want to say that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good tip, because if you get to an event and you've got some sensors on the thing, maybe a gyro or something else, and those don't, sometimes they get haywire, they fry, and they don't work, and you can't easily replace it before you hit the running next match. Having the ability for it to run, even a less capable version of it running with the default driver control, will give you the ability to move on. So it's a great idea. In fact, it was done on this robot, probably because it was built and used default driver control first. But to have your ports and motors wired appropriately to where, and in the development cycle of your robot, you build the robot, you first want to wire it up and start driving it before you start programming it. And so that allows you to get to the point where you can drive with default control first.